Hey guys, so I want to do a quick video about basic sound mixing. This is how it flows from the input signal all the way to the output. The goal is for you to understand the basics, right? This is not an in-depth discussion. In very general terms, sound mixing is in 3 steps. It's inputs, signal processing, and outputs. Inputs are the source of sound. So this is microphones, instruments, tablets, anything that needs to get plugged in and produced. In most situations, such as a church, the mixer is going to be in the back of the room and all the inputs are going to be in the front of the room. So how do you bridge that gap? A lot of times that distance is over 100 feet. You're not going to want to be running a bunch of cables from the stage all the way back to the mixer. So how do we solve this? The solution is a snake. These days, digital snakes is the way to go. You plug up all of your inputs to the input section of the snake, such as the S32, and it will consolidate all that and send the signal through an Ethernet cable all the way back to your mixer. At the mixer, it breaks it back up into all those individual channels. So if you plugged in 8 channels, you can get signal out of 8 different channels at your mixer. Ethernet cables can send a lot of data, so this is a great solution. So we've covered inputs, right? That's your instruments, that's your microphones, that's all that at the stage getting sent over via a snake all the way back to your mixer. At your mixer, this is where signal processing happens. And I want to talk about 4 main aspects of signal processing. We'll start with gain, then we'll go into EQ, then we'll go into effects, and then we'll finish off with outputs. Gain is how much signal of each channel is going to go into your mixer. Think about it as a water faucet. You're controlling the amount of flow that you can work with. Setting the gain is the first and most important step. You have to have enough flow of signal coming into your mixer that you can work with. You don't want to have too much gain to overload the mixer, but not enough gain to where you're having to try to make up for it. So setting up the gain is very key. In the X32 mixer, the gain is in the top left corner, and you usually want to aim for about -18 decibels per channel of signal. You don't want to get to the clipping portion of the gain, right? Because that means you are distorting the sound. You don't want to be too low to where you don't have enough to work with. So -18 decibels is a good target per channel for the gain. So after we've set the gain, which is the first entry point into our mixer per channel, now you start talking about EQ. Remember that every input produces a range of frequencies. Every voice, every sound produces a range of frequencies. A good rule of thumb for EQ is you want to look for frequencies you may want to cut, not necessarily boost. So you're not trying to fix too many things by boosting an EQ because it distorts the sound a lot more than cutting does. In EQing, you're trying to look for frequencies that you're not trying to publish for that instrument. So for example, if your instrument is supposed to be very high in the frequency range, then you may want to cut the low end because you don't need it for that instrument. If your instrument's meant to produce low frequencies, you may want to cut the high frequencies because for that instrument, that's just noise, right? You're not trying to produce that. You're looking for the low frequencies of that instrument. So if you're mixing a bass, for example, you might want to allow the low frequencies to pass, but cut out the high frequencies. Be smart about your EQ. Think about what's the voice coming through, what's the instrument coming through that channel, and set your EQ accordingly. The X32 has an EQ available to you built into it with 4 bands, the low band, the low mid, the high mid, and the high band. Essentially, you can choose a frequency in the low range, the low mid range, the high mid range, and the high range, and affect your signal by either boosting or cutting those frequencies. You can select that frequency, you can select how much to boost it, how much to cut it. So within signal processing, after setting the gain, after setting your EQ, then you go into the effects. There are 3 main effects that we use. We use the gate, we use a compressor, and we use the reverb. Built into the X32, right in front, you'll have the gate and the compressor. So think about a gate as a physical gate. It takes a minimum amount of force to open a gate. You don't want babies opening gates they shouldn't be opening. With the gate effect, you set a threshold and any signal that is below that level of decibels will not pass. So although that channel is live, no signal will pass if it's below that decibel level. Now, once it exceeds that level, it will allow to pass and keep processing through the mixer and you'll hear that sound. Compressor is almost the opposite. You also set a threshold, but it is meant to attenuate sounds that are above that threshold. When you start going beyond that limit, it'll start to lower its volume. So compressors are very powerful. When you think about music that you like, singers are usually very passionate and very energetic. They're going up and down on their musical range, their volume, and you wonder, if you were listening to them raw, your ears probably would hurt from all that volume changes. Why don't they? Well, that's because of compressors. When they go high, it's brought low, and when they go low, it's brought up a little bit, so everything's normalized more or less, and your ears can enjoy that a lot better. The third very important effect is reverb. So I don't have enough time to go into that right now. We can talk about it later. Reverb is meant to produce an effect of being in a larger room. It gives a little bit of echo. It makes it sound very, very natural. And we use that for voices and a few instruments. We don't apply it widely to a lot of things, but vocals is very important. Singing vocals, that is. Not if you were speaking, we want that dry. But if you are singing, that reverb makes it sound way more professional. The last part of the signal processing is outputs. So you've already set your gain, you've processed it through EQ, you've applied some effects to it. Now it's time to send it out. So the first output you care about is the main speakers. You want to send out that signal so that your audience can hear it. The main faders in the X32 control how much of each channel is going to the main speakers. Your goal here is to make sure everything sounds as balanced as possible. Faders should be something you're actively adjusting. So you don't typically want to be adjusting gain. You don't want to be adjusting EQ or effects really during a live performance. But faders you should. You should be looking to make sure that song is sounding balanced at that time. This is important when you have different people playing the same instruments or different people using the same microphones. You'll have to rebalance the faders. Trust your ears. Buses are specific places where you can collect a mix of channels. You can make separate mixes. Main faders control the main bus, the one going to the front of house speakers, but you have additional buses to create different mixes for different needs. For example, we use the first 8 buses to create mixes for in-ear monitors for all of our musicians. They're able to adjust whether they want to hear themselves more or somebody less. It's their own mix. We have another bus that controls the floor wedge monitor, a physical speaker that's on the stage so that the preacher or whoever's speaking can hear themselves when they don't have in-ear monitors. And then we also use buses 11 and 12 to create live stream audio. That's where we create the mix that goes into our live stream. So we've talked about input and signal processing. At the end of signal processing, we talked about outputs. So you've created these different mixes for each of the buses. How do you physically get those to the in-ear monitors, or how do you physically get those to the speakers? This is where the digital snake again comes in clutch. The same Ethernet cable that takes all the inputs all the way back to your mixer can allow you to send returns all the way back to that snake on stage. So you can take all the outputs of the S32, the digital snake, and plug those into either the speakers or the in-ear monitors for each of the musicians. Now, when it comes to speakers, there's 2 main kinds of speakers. There are active speakers, and all this means is they have their own power plug. You can plug it into the wall in itself. And there are passive speakers, speakers that require external power. We currently have passive speakers, so that means we need something to provide power to the speakers. That's where a power amplifier comes in. So the signal comes from the S32 digital snake as an output. It goes into the power amplifier, and then from the amplifier, it goes into our speakers, and that powers the speakers and sends the signal all the way from the mixer to the snake to the power amp to the speakers. So that's it. That's the main flow of coming from input to signal processing to output. I hope that helps. Watch it as many times as you can. God bless you.